Sexual psychopaths, serial killers, often torture their victims first, revel in the power they have over them. Quite often they ejaculate spontaneously without ever achieving penetration. They are that hopped up by their own evil. They are that hopped up by hands-on evil, just touching their victims. Sex is sex. Everybody wants sex. The old joke from the 1950s was, I want to find the guy who invented sex and ask him what he's working on now. It's the big deal in life. It is the cause of divorce, the cause of murder. It is the cause of serial murder. Homosexual men kill homosexual men. Heterosexual men kill women. It goes like that. That's it. You kill within your racial profile. You kill within your sexual orientation profile.
Hey, pick him up. Let's give him some shit. Let's fuck with this dude. Yo, hey. Come on, man. Make a run. Make a run. Make a run. Get up here. No, go, 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 go. What's up, dog? Why are you? Hey, we're rolling backwards.
Where are you heading, man?
Why are you taking my picture? Whoa! Off the anchor. Hey, by the way, you need to put your foot out. Hold it still.
Oh, yeah, drag your feet.
Yeah. Are you guys cool? You guys aren't cops, are you?
No, yeah, we're cops. Look at us.
No, we're the demon dogs, man.
You never know. Demon dogs?
Yeah, the demon dogs. Yeah.
What are you doing? Where are you guys heading? No, we're going to shoot this fucking video for this movie. This
independent companies, which means no money.
Yeah, right.
Basically.
Well, look, guys, get out of here. Sorry, man.
Sorry,
we're going the wrong way. Chris.
Chris. Okay, Chris, you have fun, man.
Good luck. Good luck, bro. Good luck. Keep your pants on.
Boy, that was weird. My little documentary.
Serial killers are sexual psychopaths who kill for sexual gratification and power over their victims. They are cowardly, they are weak, they are quite often heedless and tremendously arrogant to think that they have the right to take another human life. Serial killers are sacks of shit who deserve the very sternest measures that our American punitive system of justice has to offer. Hi, I'm Gats. I'm James Elroy. I'm a novelist, I'm a journalist, I'm a short story writer, I'm a screenwriter, and I'm here to introduce Ben Mead's Bonnaroo film about sex psychopath and serial killer Bob Berdella, who terrorized Kansas City, Missouri in the late 1980s.
It was from this second-floor room that Chris Bryson escaped on the Saturday before Easter, 1988. He was wearing nothing but a dog collar. He told police of his unbelievable torture and the worn marks on a steel bed.
You jumped from there?
Yeah, I think my leg's broken or something.
And you were there the whole time?
Yeah.
Tell me how you got there.
I was just hanging out at Joseph's down at 10th and McGee, you know, having a beer. This guy pulls up in a car. I start talking to him, you know, he wants to party. I meet guys like that all the time down there.
Yeah.
So I figure I'll go to the party with the guy. What the hell? Seem harmless enough. Catch a good buzz. Maybe get some cash out of it.
Okay. So you ever see this guy before?
I don't think so. You know, these kind of guys that come down there all the time. We get to the house, everything seems cool. The inside was a fucking mess, man. Shit everywhere. He has these two big fucking dogs inside there, too. He asked me if I wanted a beer, and I said cool. He said we'd have to go upstairs to keep the fucking dogs from going crazy. I'm not sure what happened next, but I know my fucking head hurt like hell. Next thing I know, I'm tied to this fucking bed, totally naked. Goddamn dog collar and leash around my neck. This son of a bitch is taking pictures of me. I remember he took a lot of fucking pictures of me. Shit, man.
What?
He beat the shit out of me. He put shit in my eyes. He shocked the hell out of me. He injected Drano into my voice box. He screwed me all the fucking time.
He raped you.
While I was drugged and tied up and shocked, yeah, he raped me.
And when did you meet this guy?
Monday night, sometime after midnight.
Monday night.
Yeah, but what day is it today?
Saturday.
Bryson got free by burning his bonds with matches and making a lucky leap from the second-floor window, trailing a leash from the dog collar. Had Bryson not escaped, his fate could have been in the bathroom above the torture chamber.
Whenever he got tired of his, quote, project, which in this case was dismembering this young man, he'd just leave it, secure the door, go down and take care of normal activities, and actually come back to it like it was a job.
Police found 2 skulls, but no other body parts. Sometimes the job took Berdella to the basement.
He had a drain, a floor drain down here, and also against the wall there's a shower. There's some plumbing over there, and there's a spigot up there for his, he could take a shower, hose down everything with. It's a big sturdy table. He could use it for lots of purposes.
Just start talking, because you can edit however, you can take whatever out you want. Yeah, I was 16 years old. I had my first girlfriend. We'd go to Bob's Bazaar on the weekends. She bought me my first ring there, I believe. I thought it was pretty cool. We thought Bob was cool. We were young and dumb, but he seemed exotic. He seemed like some sort of world traveler, eclectic. I'd see his masks and his jewelry, and I'd think Bombay, I'd think Africa, and I guess that's not the story, is it?
had met Bob before. I knew Al Reeder, who was the prosecuting attorney. I contacted Bob and Al Reeder and said, Al, can I be of help? You know, this is something that I'm concerned about. I was particularly concerned with the attitude the city took. A lot of laughing, a lot of Berdella jokes, making fun of what he had done, which was one of the worst crimes I'd ever seen in this city or that anybody could possibly do. And I felt that something had to be done to call attention to the seriousness of the crime and to deal with it, to respond to it. And so my role initially was to approach Al, said, if I can be of help, let me know. He said, okay, Bob is sort of suicidal. We want to keep him alive. We want to understand what happened. We'll have you visit him once or twice a week, but you have to keep it quiet. We'll put you in the back door of the jail. We won't tell anybody you're visiting because you'll probably have some death threats if anybody knows you're coming in.
It was pretty odd. I mean, number one, it was Easter weekend. It was on the Saturday before Easter, so not something you were particularly looking for to happen. It was in the middle of the NCAA Final Four, which was in Kansas City that year, and it was in the middle of my re-election. It played into my re-election because the person who ran against me that year kept bringing up the case and using it in the campaign against me. I think it kind of backfired on her, but it became part of the campaign nevertheless. So the timing of it was truly unusual. I would love to see him executed. I think what he did is abominable. There is no way to minimize the atrocity of what he did, regardless of what his demeanor is in the interview. You cannot minimize the inhumanity that this guy committed on other people.
My initial thought was that it was a couple of homosexuals that had probably had a lover's quarrel, and that it would play itself out like many other cases do that start out in a similar nature.
I was in charge of the fugitive apprehension that handled missing persons. And at the time, there were 2 missing persons reports filed. In both those missing persons reports, the common denominator at that time was Bob Berdella.
I was the courts reporter, Jackson County Courts, for the Kansas City Times. And so heard the announcement. I knew it was going to be coming up on my beat. Tom Jackman was cops, I was courts. It was pretty much our ball game.
Bob's base of operations during the day and where he came when he had guys tied to his bed in his house was right there at the Westport Flea Market Bar and Grill. He had this booth called Bob's Bazaar, where he sold just a lot of weird stuff. Shrunken heads, bone jewelry, paintings, antiques. He considered himself this sort of man of the world that, was bringing in all these incredible valuables to you, the lowly public. And people that shopped there always talked about what a condescending dickhead he could be.
I started collecting and dealing in ethnic folk art back in '71, and then in '78 I came over here to basically temporarily to clean out my basement. I had a basement sale to clean out my house, and then I came over here to clean out my basement. And just did very well, and started bringing over some of the stuff that I was dealing in as far as the ethnic jewelry and folk art.
The weekend that Berdella was caught, the NCAA basketball Final Four was being played in Kansas City. Now, Bob couldn't give a damn about basketball, but he did want to capitalize on all the hype and all the tourists. So he put 4 human skulls in the window there with a little sign beneath it that said, "The Final Four."
I made a mistake. That's what I thought at the time. I knew that this was for real. When I was up in that bed, I thought about my kids, and I thought about that stupid-ass decision that I made. And that was a real hard one.
They were young, white males who we suspect most of them were involved in male prostitution. We don't know that about all of them, but clearly they were, particularly the ones he picked up off of the street, were some of those were involved in male prostitution. What's interesting to me is that, with respect to all of these people, he turned what he saw as a slight against himself into a vendetta against the individual, a vendetta so terrible that it was worth killing for. And it was clear from the confession that he had sexual designs on all of these people.
Okay, it's Berdella's confession now. I want you no fucking around. Just go in there and take care of it. I don't want no fucking around.
But first of all, his name isn't Bordella, it's Berdella. It's an Italian name, shithead. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Please raise your right hand. Just swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help God.
Yes.
I think that he had a long-standing love affair with the male anatomy, and like a little kid playing with an erector set or playing with one of those models of the human body, he wanted to find out what was inside. In other words, it's the ultimate objectification of another human being.
We got woken up yesterday at the crack of dawn with the sound of heavy machinery digging in the yard next door, and we thought, what the heck is going on? And then it came out in the news that day that they had found skeletal remains buried in the backyard of our neighbor, Bob Berdella.
I don't know, he seemed like a good enough neighbor. He was a quiet guy, but I can tell you from everyone I've talked to, he just always smelled really bad.
My first reaction that this was a biggie was when we dug the head up out of the backyard on Easter Sunday. That's when it really first hit me, and I knew then that we had a major investigation on our hands, and I probably was going to be in the middle of it.
Well, the way I got involved with Bob Berdella is I'd done a lot of investigative reporting for national magazines, including a book called Assassination in America, and I was local. So they were looking for someone with a criminal background, knew how to ask questions, do that sort of thing, and I was contacted and conducted a whole bunch of audio interviews with Berdella in the Jackson County Jail as preparation for the video interview that we eventually did with him. Mr. Berdella, you're sitting here as a man who's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. You've confessed to murder of 6 young men in this city and crimes that horrified the city and much of the country. You've confessed to, in various degrees, felonious restraint, drugging people, sexually abusing them, torturing them, killing them, dismembering them. And until now, you've refused all interviews. So in light of all those facts, I have to ask you, why are you here? What is it you have to say to us? What is it you want to say about yourself in this case?
Well, I've had the media clamoring to get interviews with me. And after I made my last pleas, I wanted to get at least part of my side of it out. I found it very hard to find any way to do that in Kansas City. The media has so biased my case, portraying me as being non-human, and their motivation is no separate from the way I treated my victims. I treated them as something less than human. It's nothing more than a play toy or not a play object. This is what the media has done to me. It's dehumanized me so that it can believe, along with the public, that things like human sacrifice, Satanism, demonic practices are more believable than me being a neighbor next door who reached a point in his life where he could do monstrous acts. That's not the same thing as being a monster.
That's preposterous and most convoluted logic and most specious logic on God's green earth. He wanted to kill, he wanted to continue to kill. Had he not been apprehended, had the police been asleep at the wheel when his last victim escaped, which is what caused him to be arrested, he'd still be out there killing people at 55, 56 years of age now.
in the 80s, within about a 2 or 3 year period, he had been in the emergency room at Truman on several occasions to have the head of his penis reattached. It's easy to reattach. You know, you can just sew the skin and maybe some of the blood vessels, you know, but the nerve endings may not grow through again, so they may not have the same kind of sensation, you know, so it's just dead at the tip, I would think, at least after 2 or 3 tries of this. And so, as I said, it always made me very curious that perhaps the kinds of things that he had done to these young men were not so much about lust or sexual sensation as they were simply about power, you know, because I don't think he had that kind of feeling left on his penis after 2 or 3 operations.
I was driving to my flower shop the morning he had been arrested, or at least that the story came out, and I heard that he had been arrested for some really hideous crimes, and I don't remember how much I heard at the time, and I was really shocked. It was my first thought was that the cops are just out to get another gay man. I had been gay bashed a few years previously, and when I went to press charges, the cops told me that I would either, if I pressed charges, I would be arrested for having propositioned this man. So I had to let the man go in order to myself not be prosecuted for homosexual activity. Just all I had done was propositioned him. And so when I heard about Bob Berdella, my first thought was, from knowing him and from talking with him and everything, this could not be. This just simply could not be. They're just out to frame another gay man, and that's all it was.
Bob would make these appointments for these boys that he had been made the court guardian for, and they were, you know, supposedly runaway kids, little hustler problem kids, and he was supposedly trying to get them spiffed up so that they could go out and get a job. And so he was supposed to be trying to lead him into doing that. Well, so he'd make appointments Bob would make appointments for the boys' haircuts to be done by my friend Larry, who owned the shop, and then he would make an appointment with me for me to cut his hair. So I would cut Bob's hair, and Larry would cut these, you know, we would say the little future corpses.
I lived at Berdella's house off and on for about 6 months, and I worked for him at his flea market. He would give me Valiums, and then sometimes I would ask him for them, but most of the time I think he was trying to force them to me, and at that time I did drink and things like that. He never really hurt me that I ever knew of, and he always helped me. There was a picture of me on TV along with a few other men at the time, and you know, the victims.
It was a real dilemma for me because I was listening to these hideous stories about this man and what he had done, and this was the man that I had chatted with in my shop, that we had sat there and talked about all kinds of things and had, like I said earlier, a real kindred spirit going. And so he threw me into a real dilemma, the whole experience in terms of looking at this man and looking at these horribly villainous acts, and at the same time inside myself knowing that this man was not all bad.
No matter what we told him, you know, he'd want to argue with us. He'd come down. We told him his alternate was out once, and he'd come down. He had to check it out himself and wanted to argue with us. So after he did that 5 or 6 times, we ran him off. We got tired of listening to his shit. Then I used to run into him. I used to eat up at the flea market up in Westport fairly routinely, and I'd run into his sick ass up there. Found out later on what he was doing to them young kids, and my little brother was in the police academy at the time. So we get home on the 6 o'clock news. There's my brother digging for bones and body parts in Berdella's backyard. Yeah, I'm glad that sick son of a bitch got what was coming to him.
We're now at 4315 Charlotte Street. This is where Bob Berdella lived and where at least 6 people died.
Your prosecutors, and I do want to quote this, when you came to plead, called your crimes wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman.
When was this done?
I believe in documents associated with the Sheldon charges. To repeat that quote from the prosecution, these crimes were wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman.
Okay. I think if you check with just about any attorney, you'll find that that is the standard clause that's used when they want to build a case for capital one with the death penalty.
Without the legalism, would you agree that those crimes are wantonly vile or inhuman?
I won't disagree.
Well, I could talk about the torture pretty much because, you know, I was away through most of that. It's one time when he hooked these cables up to my testicles, and you know I was naked, and I'm not worried what he's doing. He stepped back and he touched these wires together, and I flipped and flopped them all over the bed. That kind of woke me up. He shocked me. He was electrocuting me, and then at the same time he was taking Polaroid pictures. And at that time, I just fake passed out after he turned it off on us, and he was done. And then he came immediately and put a potato sack over my head and kind of closed it like that. And so my hands were tied here and my feet were tied, and I breathed through my mouth, okay? And he already had a washcloth in my mouth and a piano bar tied with piano bar. And I wasn't able to get no oxygen at all, so I was more in this position. And I was trying to rip the potato sack off, and that's when he came in. And that's when he flew into it. He just ripped that thing off, and he jumped on my chest. He had an iron bar like that, and he was trying to just strike me in the head, and it seemed like it was for about 5 minutes. And, you know, I was like this, and, you know, he was trying to hit my head, and I was more or less, I was deflecting him on with my hands and stuff. When he got done with that, he disappeared for a while. He came back in, and he started digging his, I thought it was a clothesline or something. He was just trying to dig it in my ears. He was just stabbing in my ears. That was one of the scariest things that he had done, because, you know, jabbing me, I didn't get no injuries from that. I don't know how, but then he disappeared again. He came back, and he injected a hypodermic needle in my throat, all the way around the vocal cords, and with Drano. He took some Q-tips. He came back in, and he stabbed in my eyes with some bleach. He dipped the Q-tips with some bleach, and he just stabbed in my eyes. As he did all that, I was pretty much messed up, and I think he injected me some more animal tranquilizer after that. And during the next couple of days, I was sick. I was like getting pneumonia was setting in. This is where he told me. I just knew I was dying. You know, he said he wanted me to put me in a cold bath so he could break the fever, all this crap. He was injecting me with penicillin in my legs to make sure. I think he was trying to keep me alive for a while. At that point, I think his intention was with the torture was to break your will, and you know, you would just not give no problems. The only time I ever got up, he would allow me to get up, was when I had to go go to the bathroom and do number 2. Okay, he on in the bed. That's what he said. And when I had to take a bath one time, and he wanted me to shave one time. Okay, my eyes were swollen up like golf balls. I couldn't see out my eyes, and I couldn't talk. And my arms were at least twice the size from being no movement in them. There's no blood flow or nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to be a man and say shit happened to you like that. So really what brought me a couple of times from his sexual shit was just passing out, acting like I was so sick. You know, I'm not trying to say he had a heart, but, you know, I guess he just didn't want me to die at that time, so.
Well, like Joseph Mengele and people in the concentration camps during World War II, he was an experimenter. He experimented with caustic chemicals, shot the young male prostitutes up with Drano in the vocal cords to see if he could mute them, and he took hundreds of polygraphs of them, Polaroids. And these were, of course, he couldn't go to your local 1-hour speedy print and get them developed without condemning himself, but these were there for purposes of savoring and purposes of masturbation. And it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Also, he knew damn well he couldn't go out and kill every day, that the hammer would fall much quicker than it finally did. So this was a way for him to relive the torture of his victims.
After Berdella got these guys in his house and in his bedroom, he basically had intercourse with them by whatever means possible. And he would at times photograph himself in the act of having anal intercourse with somebody or forcing them to give him a blowjob. He sodomized them with his fist, with various with a cucumber, with a carrot, and he noted all these things. That's how we know this, is because he made notes in his notes of what position he took when he was screwing them, whether it was BF for butt fuck, or FF for front fuck, or SF for side fuck, or CF for carrot fuck, or cucumber fuck. It was pretty amazing stuff.
Another report was that you kept detailed torture logs and diaries. Did you?
I kept sheets of paper that I had made some notations on. This is between the mattress and springs on my bed. This is one of those packages containing numerous photographs and what became to be known as meticulous, methodical diaries. Those pieces of paper in there are these meticulous diaries.
These are the pictures of the more than 200 photographs, some of them of young men, sexual partners, and these are in some ways, and these that we see here are the sheets of paper upon which you made notes.
Right. This is a copy of one of those pages.
It looks like a loose leaf paper. It does contain information about amounts of drugs and so on. So what is your complaint with the police calling these detailed diaries?
By your evaluation, does this look methodical?
It doesn't look methodical.
Meticulous?
It looks a little sloppy.
They are not the bound in Corinthian leather, written on parchment diaries that the media apparently tries to describe them as. The sheets of paper, they're notes.
Berdella was homosexual, and he practiced sodomy on his victims with his fist with various vegetables. And the pain must have been excruciating. And it's, although I don't believe in the death penalty per se, I almost wish it could be stretched to fry guys like Berdella. Of course, he's dead now, died of a heart attack in prison. C'est la guerre. I'm glad he's dead. He was a piece of shit. He was without redeeming social value. It may be, even though closure is a fatuous concept, it never occurs for any victim or relative of a victim or loved one of a victim. I'd like to think that he's suffering right now and that the Prince of Darkness has a poker straight up his ass. It's entirely true that Berdella killed marginal people. He killed people who were vulnerable to drugging, who were vulnerable to being lured to a secret spot, and thence killed. Had he been a child killer, there would have been considerably more police attention on this very, very early.
And I think part of the reason that there was no outrage was because the young men involved were, for the most part, male prostitutes. They were from broken home. They left home. They didn't have a community around them to protest. And so the media and the public in general did not attach the same value to those lives they would if it had been somebody out of an old-line Kansas City blue blood family. If that had been the case, it would have been a different response altogether. But because they were prostitutes for the most part, because they were runaways, because they didn't have families with any political clout, not a lot of seriousness, I felt, was attached to the actual crimes.
That's not true. That's not true. The two individuals, they were individuals as far as I'm concerned. They were missing. The common denominator was Bob Berdella. And we tried to go after Bob Berdella. We didn't sit back because these people had some kind of history. we pursued it, and that is a falsehood there. I have never known, just because of their race, sex, their sexual origin, religion, or whatever, to sit back and say, just throw that on the back burner. That has never, ever been done to my knowledge. It was never done while I was there.
I can't think of a thing we would have done any differently. It would have maybe been easier if they had been people of more prominence, because we would have had privy to more relatives and close associates than what we did. Maybe people who would have had more background information on them, because a couple of our victims, we really had no one to turn to as far as trying to find out information from their past.
None of them came from higher up on the socioeconomic scale, I suppose to say. All of them were either from working families.
In this case, young homosexual prostitutes should have been told after the first two victims disappeared, be very, very careful. Or better yet, Jesus Christ, don't be a homosexual prostitute. It's a losing proposition any way you slice it.
I was not a male prostitute. I was addicted to drugs at the time. His line was, you get high, okay? His line was, you get high, I got some volumes, and, you know, at the time I didn't have cigarette money. And so I'm thinking, well, look, I mean, I go work this dude for something. And, you know, he looked at Bob Berdella, he didn't look gay, you know, so it wasn't even nothing like that going on. And at that time I had a choice to get dropped off, maybe, or to go that way. So, and unfortunately I took the wrong way.
Never met the man, thank God. Never needed to write a song about him, at least. I mean, that's what I did back then. It was in radio. I was a radio guy. I was a disc jockey. I was irreverent. I was unfeeling. Whatever was funny went on the radio.
How did you feel when you learned that not long after your arrest, the local radio stations, two of them at least, were running a Bob Berdella parody song and were asking people to come to parties wearing dog collars?
Well, I think the newspaper article reported that even the families of the victims were upset by the song. I have never had a chance to hear the song.
I was sitting at Antoine's on the boulevard, the old Antoni's, and having lunch, and thinking that this was such a huge story in Kansas City that I had to write something. There was some song in the classic rock era that would fit it perfectly, and I'll be damned if I, over a little $3.75 steak lunch, figure out they call me Bob Berdella. Instead of Mellow Yellow, it became Bob Berdella. Everything just fit in. I mean, you had everything with the bones in the backyard and the fluoroscope in the basement and all the Polaroid photographs that he had and the hitchhikers and the dog collars and the electric shocks and the needles sticking out of their necks. I mean, you had so much to write from, you couldn't help but come up with something.
They call me Bob Berdella. They call me Bob Berdella. Do it again. They call me Bob Berdella. Don't stick that in.
I had also been told when I first came into jail that the Fox radio station had run a promo giving prizes to their listeners if they showed up at the station in a dog collar and with a leash on. The people here in the institution, the correctional officers, the caseworker, even the psychiatrist, were, I think, surprised to find out that that upset me.
And it did upset you?
Very much so.
I had been in Ethiopia the year before, and I'd gone through the camps, and I'd seen the dying children. I'd seen death, I'd seen evil in a social sense, and I had felt that somehow it had a positive impact on me as a person. So I entered into this arrangement with Bob, in which I met with him for an hour, hour and a half, twice a week, and I thought I could handle anything. But I didn't realize the impact. I was not able to eat, not able to have sex, lost weight, became extremely withdrawn because I was dealing with stuff, and then I was told this is stuff you can't tell other people about because it's pretty, it was not the type of stuff you could go around and say, hey, let me tell you about what Bob and I talked about today. You had to keep it under wraps, and that was the agreement. So my wife and I did not talk about it. I didn't realize the impact it was having, except over a period of time, 6 months. So I had gotten down and maybe lost 20 pounds, and it was just sort of like a castaway that had fallen on hard times, and it was just skin and bones.
After Berdella went to prison, I got an interview with him. They put me in this little tiny room with him. I asked them to take the handcuffs off. I'm not sure why, but I did. He didn't seem very threatening at that point, It's like all the air had been let out of him. his condition was that I bring 2 tape recorders, one to tape the interview for myself, one to give him a tape. I had asked him, you know, how he got by with some of this stuff, because there were plenty of indications that there were some nasty things going on in Berdella's house. He told me that there were some judges who would send people to him, and that he often bonded people out, and that for a while the parole board had considered him someone where they could send troubled youth and young adults. I was recording the conversation. After I left, the tapes were confiscated, and the warden called me and informed me that something was wrong with my tape recorder because they couldn't get the tape to play after they'd confiscated it. I went to interview Marcia Walsh. She'd just gotten back from a trip to the Arctic Circle where she had been saving baby seals. She really couldn't tell me much about why she thought that Berdella was a drug counselor or that sort of thing.
You recall we mentioned before that there were reports in the Westport Flea Market where you had your shop that people would say, oh yes, I do remember he had these strange smelling dishes of food, that he had bead bones. And later on there were speculations, at least in the community and in some aspects of the media, that the remains of your victim were somehow being transported and prepared as meals and prepared as jewelry in your shop.
I was quickly able to identify to the police the other dealers in that section of the market where we rotated potluck rather than eat the flea market food again. And that you could question any of these people and they'd be able to tell you that the food was good. There was nothing suspect about the turkey or ham or beef that was in these dishes.
Hey, we're at the flea market by Bob's old Bazaar. Bob was kind of a sick guy. He got a little too into his hobbies, headhunting, cannibalism, and cooking. And I think cooking saved his life, actually. It's one thing to have one guy dabbling in cannibalism in your small town. It's another to have scores of people. Bob had chili at his Bazaar that he'd occasionally serve. I think it had people in him. Odd guy. It got him off of a lethal injection, though. He was a sick boy.
He would cut the bodies up using his expertise as a chef and bring them out here to the curb on Monday morning and monitor it from his window to make sure the trash men took the trash away. And that was his method of disposing of the bodies of the men that he killed.
Bob Berdella was a real landfill Louie. To think that he put pieces of a human being out in the trash for trash men to collect on Mondays is astounding. All they had to do was catch the scent of decomposing flesh or look inside and realize that there was a chopper inside.
I was very suspicious about the landfill as the putting the bodies out with the trash. It just didn't sound in character. Not to mention the problems that would cause. How secure is that to put a body out on your curb in a plastic bag? You know, you wrap stuff up and put it out on the curb. You never know whether it's going to be torn apart by dogs or hit by a car. You know, that's. He seems like a more careful person to me than that.
I believe it was the police department they called and said that that they needed us. They needed us to appraise a piece of residential property that I can't tell us what it is, but they'll have a car there in 5 minutes to pick us up. We had no idea where we're going, what we're doing. We end up at Bob Berdella's house. Dining room had some weird stuff in there, coffee table with some weird pictures on it, and screaming faces, that sort of thing. Vicious dogs in cages right outside the back door. Huge dog kennels, chain link fenced kennels. They weren't little dog runs for spot, to run through. These were secured enclosures. They were not couch potato dogs. These were huge dogs. The kitchen was really strange. A couple big stainless steel commercial tables. First, you figure the guy could have been a chef at a restaurant, could have owned it, right? I didn't, I knew of Bob Berdella, but didn't know, nobody knew this stuff. So he thought, okay, he's got dinner parties, caters, who knows what. But then you look around and it just wasn't right. It wasn't a normal kitchen. It wasn't a kitchen you can entertain in. One of the stainless steel tables had, built-in sinks and huge garbage disposal. It was a large. Never seen a garbage disposal that large. What the hell else is he going to do with it? He's not going to grind up lettuce in that thing.
Basically, the food or waste enters from the top down onto the grind plate, which is spinning at the time the food enters the machine. The food is propelled by these teeth here along the side, or against the side rather, of the shredder unit, which pulverizes the waste, forcing it through these cutting chambers into the grind chamber where the waste exits the machine. I don't know much about human bones and what they look like when they're out of the body, but I would figure they'd be pretty large, and as you can see, the grind chamber's not, exactly huge. So if you want a bone to come down here, and let's say it was this big, it lodges in here, machine starts, it grabs that bone, jams it real quick because it in this area of the machine, it's not gonna grind that bone, take it on and rip it up. It's going to jam and stop. The flesh would not be a problem at all. It would rip it up and send it on down the drain line pretty easily. I do see hospitals use them, unfortunately, to grind things. I have seen some labs use them to get rid of tumors and whatnot.
Men will go to any length to get head. Is my only comment on this.
You said, I want the police to explain why they allow the loved ones of families to die in the convenient area of 10th and McGee.
I don't think any family of my victims or anybody else that has been killed down related to 10th and McGee are going to be happy to find out that their loved one is basically written off by the police as far as investigations go, etc. Because they died in a convenient neighborhood. The police knew what was going on, so it's no big deal.
And that accounts for your remark to me, and I don't mean at all to make light of it, that I killed 6, but the police, by allowing this to stay open, they killed more.
Yes, this has been something that's been going on for over 20 years, to my knowledge.
It seems to me that you're suggesting that had the police done their job, had they followed the leads, had they really been on your case prior to April 2nd, 1988, they would have caught you, and some of the suffering could have been prevented.
Maybe not caught me. Scared me off, maybe. Prevented things from happening after, Hal? Definitely.
In a way, do you wish they had?
Yes.
Well, it was the police's fault because they should have caught me and said, or they should have stopped. They should stop having all those attractive little boys down there tempting me. Or, you know, it was like nothing had anything to do with his, you know, he had no responsibility at all. It was just like, you know, well, it's like, hey, I was on a diet, but you kept shoving food down my throat. You know, it's like, oh, okay.
6 victims for a serial killer over a 4-year period is low. Generally, the urge to kill hits much more frequently than that. But I think that Berdella was a hoarder. He spent a lot of time with his victims. He needed his residents to house them. He needed a safe house to perform his hideous experiments. So I don't see him as a roadside picker-up of young men, a guy like, well, William Bonin, the freeway killer here in Los Angeles. I don't see him as that kind of guy. I think 6 may be the total.
That question was always there, and I was always being asked that. I have no specific information that there were other victims. That could have been. At times I had some thoughts that might have been, but Bob certainly never indicated that he had misled anyone in his testimony.
Personally, I believe there were only 6 victims. A lot of people disagree with that. I think one of the things that convinces me is the fact that Berdella had already cut a deal, so his punishment was not going to be any different if it were 6 or 60.
When you look at the research on serial killers, they don't kill fewer people over time. They go up, and he went down. I also thought it was odd that they would find 2 skulls. Like I say, he's a collector. He collects everything. If you look at those search warrants, this man didn't throw anything away. So why would you keep 2 skulls and then just load every bit of every other body up and put it out on the curb for the trash to pick up? I don't think I can accept that.
I can tell you what led up to the escape. Like I said, the first couple of days I was unconscious, and you know, I couldn't really see nothing. I didn't really know if my eyesight was coming back, what was going to happen. If my arms, I couldn't move my arms, it was totally numb. And you know, I just didn't know what to do head up his sleep, you know. But I did know at this time he was not going to let me go. I don't go to church every Sunday, but I do have I believe in God, and I did call on him. You know, I don't really take no credit for anything because I kind of more or less put things in his hands. He had my hands tied to where if I tried to move around, they would tighten. You know, and then when he got back, there was real restriction, you know, marks in your hand. He knew you've been trying to get away. And plus another thing, he would turn the TV up so loud, and he would go out of the room. I didn't really know if he had left, if he was really left the house, or if he was watching me to see what I was trying to do. And I believed everything he said. Okay, he told me he had killed before and he would again. Okay, on the 4th day, my hands was numb, and I was thinking I couldn't do nothing with them. I asked him if he ever tied anybody's hands any differently. I said, if you can tie my hands and feel assured that I can't get away, could you tie them anywhere? He goes, and he did, and he tied them took them down from here and tied them here. You know, I always waited like 2 or 3 hours after he was gone. What I thought was 2 or 3 hours to try to do anything. I tried playing with the knots, man. I was moving the knots, and I got them off. I knew I could get them off, okay? But it wasn't the time. I didn't know. So I was going to do it. At that point, on the 4th day, I had planned for the 5th day I was going to do it, okay? The next day, he went when he was regular scared when we did everything. Asked me if I had to go to the bathroom, and I said no. But while I was talking to him, he had some matches, because he always gave me a cigarette, right? You know, before he left. You know, I smoked a cigarette, and he always took the matches away. And he was standing there, and he threw them down just kind of by the table. Then I kept his attention talking to him while he didn't remember to pick the matches up again. You know, I don't know why, but that's what happened. I already knew I was going to have to burn the ropes with the matches. So after I got them loose, I couldn't reach down and touch my feet but there was the bedpost was a metal bedpost, and I was so freaked out in my head that I thought he had booby trapped the metal. You know what I'm saying? I actually thought I was gonna get shocked or electrocuted if I would try to touch the metal. So that is why I burnt the ropes. And after I got that loose, it was just like a fast panic, man. I didn't know shit about the window because the window was covered by a big picture. I didn't know if it was gonna open. I didn't know if he was in the downstairs. I didn't know how much time I had. I really didn't know how high I was up or anything. Or I surely would try to look for my clothes before I went out. You know, that's the fear. Once I knew that I had committed to untying the ropes, you know, I just knew it was all or nothing. And so the adrenaline building, man. I just got up, raised the window, and I was happy that it came all the way up, and I looked down. So I remember seeing a dog dish right there below on the sidewalk. And I was thinking, damn, I'm gonna jump down there and get attacked by these dogs. So I crawl out, and I'm hanging. I was gonna try to jump over to the fence. The next yard was, appeared to be about this far on the sidewalk. It was all divided. I was gonna jump over to the next where the grass was. I was gonna try to get a little sway going and jump over there, but the ledge broke, and I fell straight down. I hurt my leg a little bit, but that was nothing. I dove over the fence, and I wasn't thinking about being naked or nothing. I just wanted to, I was out of there, so.
I'm in a movie, I got my life back. Yeah, I even have my own song. Hell, I guess some of us are just lucky. I'm the one who got away. Even an old big broken watch is right twice a day. I'm Lazarus, I'm the Phoenix. It's not my time to go. So sit back, but don't relax. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Are you saying you feel remorse or that you've been misunderstood?
I'm not going to sit here with my finger to my chin and say nobody understands me. Yes, there has been a lot of remorse.
And he may well feel remorse, but he has the remorse of a crook that got caught.
Oh, poor Bobby. The world grieves for you. The world reads that excerpt from W.H. Auden's poem, and I forget the title. Maybe it's his most famous poem, September 1st, 1939. It goes something like this: I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Well, maybe somebody gave you a few whacks in the head when you were a kid, but I doubt if you were systematically terrorized the way you terrorized your victims. You deserve no sympathy.
There was a report in the Sunday Kansas City Star in December about the dangers you might face after you leave the Jackson County Correction Facility and are moved to another larger prison. How do you feel about reports like that? Do they make you anxious?
They give me some reason for concern, but one of the reasons I'm concerned is that these were not just reports. These were digging out quotes from unnamed prosecutors implying that the inmates down there are waiting to get their hands on me. I am, at this point, less concerned about the inmates acting on their own as opposed to the inmates or the inmate acting in response to maybe some directive or coercion from some police officers.
Do you think you're being set up, perhaps?
Well, I think the Star and Times have, since they haven't been able to get a court to put me to death, are now trying to get the inmates to do it for them.
In a sense, he was killed by the prison system. I don't make those kind of judgments, and it would be like a death sentence that the prison system probably took on instead of the judicial system. But I wouldn't say that was fitting. According to his parents, his mom, they withheld the medication, and he died of a heart attack. So the question was put to me by several people who Bob had told he was going to give the complete story to and were visiting him in prison and didn't give the complete story to, called me and asked me if I would lead an effort to call for an investigation and to condemn the prison system for their lack of responsiveness to Bob's medication. I did not do that. It was not something at that time I was willing to do, to take on the role of challenging the prison system, because I could understand in some ways how Bob got himself in that situation. Very demanding, very difficult in terms of trying to make others feel very small, and himself being very important. And I'm just guessing that the guards in the prison system just said, "You're not going to control us," and they withheld the medication. He died. I think probably unfortunate, because I don't think he had, in return for his life, given the testimony to our reader and admitted that what he had done, and so that guaranteed him life in prison. And it's not up to us to make those decisions. It should have been done.
What I said was at the time that I thought that even though he wasn't given the death penalty, he would, number one, he would go to prison for the rest of his life, and number two, he'd die in prison a lot sooner than he would if he were executed. In Missouri, it takes us about 10 years to execute somebody. I don't know how long he was in prison, but probably about 6 years before he died. And why I believe that was simply that his behavior was so uncontrollable and was so bad towards anybody, towards everybody that he encountered, that I just assumed that he would do something in jail that would get him killed. Now, he died of a heart attack. Was he murdered? I don't know. He got what he deserved. You know, I don't know how you put an end to all that. But the truth of the matter is, if you go back and look at the facts, that's how he ended up. He ended up getting what he deserved.
It's really too bad that he didn't live longer than he did, because I think he was getting, he was a control freak, and people were losing interest in him. And I think that had he lived, sooner or later, he would have given up more information. I don't think he could have helped himself. I think he wanted the attention.
And you know the whole story about how he died in jail? Well, I don't know the whole story. I just know he died of a heart attack. But the story everybody was telling was that he was like, okay, he probably was asking for more potato chips, and he was cussing out some guard, and then he's like, oh, guard, they're like, oh yeah, we'll be there, and they just let him die. It's like, everybody was like, well, and they had to pay extra. Supposedly, they had to pay extra to keep him isolated. Because everybody would have wanted to have a piece of him. So anyway.
You played me like an anvil. You beat me into the dawn. Just you and me, no witnesses. Then it can't be wrong. Now shut your eyes. Are you invisible? No one will hear you scream. Dead man walking, no one's talking. All that's left is your stain. So found out the demons, the gatekeepers all turn away. Sparks from the hammer, this will be your last day. Stave off the sunset, maybe the darkness will come complete. For whom does the anvil toll, Bobby? The anvil tolls for thee.
Just a bunch of earth is all that's left of 4315 Charlotte. But some people will never forget the house nor the man who lived here. Bob Berdella, Kansas City's most infamous serial killer, is dead. He died in prison after his victims were killed in his home. Berdella confessed to sexually and physically torturing 6 men here. But some believe there were more victims and hope digging up the house might unearth some secrets. That's why millionaire Dell Dunmeyer, who owns the property, had workers carefully tear it down. Private Detective Ashley Hearn was here in 1988 when the truth came out, and he's been here for the past 5 weeks, making sure no other bodies turned up. He says the stairs to the basement will be saved, as well as this drain, reportedly used to carry away the blood of Berdella's victims. Well, this appears to be the final chapter of the Berdella story, and no one could be happier than those who live on either side who will split the property.
I did not see any attempt of clergy, any attempt of politicians, attorneys, police to ever try and wrap that up and say, here's what happened, here's what it means, here's what we've learned from it.
I guess I kind of got obsessed with it. I think a lot of us did. Me, the lawyers, the other reporters, everybody. It was difficult to let go of the case. And at a certain point, I just decided that's exactly what I needed to do. So I gathered boxes of documents and notes and tape-recorded interviews. And one day I just took all that, loaded it up in the car, and drove out to the city landfill and dumped it.
When there are pieces of the puzzle, put them together.
Facts don't diminish the myth, because we need the stories. And we even need the stories of the quote-unquote bad people as much as we need the stories of the good people. We need our heroes and we need our villains. And so the myth becomes the real story then, not the facts.
I don't know how he does it, but, you know, you get obsessed. And, you know, here you are in Hawaii, flew all the way here to pursue this case for this movie. So I think you can see that it kind of just sort of keeps going.
Bob Berdella deserves no sympathy. Bob Berdella got off easy compared to his victims. In the future, people, be quiet, be cautious, be circumspect around strangers, especially if you're women, especially if you're gay men and women. You know, they fit the victim profile. Elderly people, children, be cautious. There's demons out there. The odds are profoundly against you ever running into someone like Bob Berdella. But it pays to be cautious because these guys do exist. I'm James Elroy, offering slag to throw on the grave, hopefully unmarked, hopefully remote, hopefully untended, of Bob Berdella. Thanks for joining us.
Gather around, all you chillin'. I got a story I wanna tell. It's about the next door neighbor, a creature spawned in hell. He's one sick bastard, no one to pity. Mr. and Mrs. Berdella's boy, he's the butcher of Kansas City. Bazaar, bazaar. It's getting kinda iffy, bazaar, bazaar. Sicky, Bob the Boogeyman. You won't wake up from this dream, he's Bob the Boogeyman. No one can hear you scream, Bob the Boogeyman. He'll wipe your eyes when you know he's big, mad, Bob the Boogeyman. Bob's cherry was a mighty manly mixer. Herbs and spices, but never any kicks. Franks and beans, a chunky and nuts. Chap Tuesday's breed was Dahmer's advice. Chop down, y'all. Bazaar, Bob Bazaar, real Bazaar.
Let's welcome the Demon Dog Bark. He's got a 12-inch plan to close in the dark.
Ammonia in your eyes make it hard to see. Some Drano in your throat make it hard to scream. And it would seem from the collar around your neck that your non-virgin ass is about to get ringed. Bludgeoned and pummeled and raped and abused. Cooking in the chili pot is where they find you. Browned up like goo and crushed crackers too. You're better as a data than a male prostitute.
He's big, bad, Bob. He's Bob the Boogeyman. When he gives you a Drano cocktail, it makes it hard to holler. He'll put you on a short lead, make you wear Fido's collar. Be careful when you tread upon the slippery sunny slope. You'll wind up Bob's Bazaar, Bazaar, the place there is no Bazaar. Bazaar, Bazaar. Bazaar, bazaar. Bazaar, bazaar. Bazaar, bazaar. Bazaar, bazaar. We're coming to get ya. Who there? Why, it's Bob the Boogeyman. That's not Bob. Hey, look. Oh yeah, he's the Boogeyman. He's gonna get you. He's gonna get you. Can I say get you one more time? Say it one more time. Get you. Get your yayas here. What? Oh, that's another song. That's right. Bob the Boogeyman. Bob the Boogeyman. Who? Bob the Boogeyman. He's Bob the Boogeyman. He's Bob the Boogie. The Boogie. The Boogeyman.
A floor drain down here, and what also against the wall there's a shower. There's some plumbing over there, and there's a spigot up there for his, he could take a shower, hose down everything with.
It's a big sturdy table. He could use it for lots of purposes.
Just start talking, because you can edit however, you can take whatever out you want. Yeah, I was 15, 16 years old. I had my first girlfriend. We'd go to Bob's Bazaar on the weekends. She bought me my first ring there, I believe. I thought it was pretty cool. We thought Bob was cool. We were young and dumb, but he seemed exotic. He seemed like some sort of world traveler, eclectic. I'd see his masks and his jewelry, and I'd think Bombay, I'd think Africa, and I guess that's not the story, is it?
It was from this second-floor room that Chris Bryson escaped on the Saturday before Easter, 1988. He was wearing nothing but a dog collar. He told police of his unbelievable torture and the worn marks on a steel bed.
You jumped from there?
Yeah, I think my leg's broken or something.
And you were there the whole time?
Yeah.
Tell me how you got there.
I was just hanging out at Joseph's down at 10th and McGee, you know, having a beer. This guy pulls up in a car. I start talking to him, you know, he wants to party. I meet guys like that all the time down there.
Yeah.
So I figure I'll go to the party with the guy. What the hell? Seem harmless enough. Catch a good buzz. Maybe get some cash out of it.
Okay. So you ever see this guy before?
I don't think so. You know, these kind of guys that come down there all the time. We get to the house, everything seems cool. The inside was a fucking mess, man. Shit everywhere. He has these two big fucking dogs inside there, too. He asked me if I wanted a beer, and I said cool. He said we'd have to go upstairs to keep the fucking dogs from going crazy. I'm not sure what happened next, but I know my fucking head hurt like hell. Next thing I know, I'm tied to this fucking bed, totally naked. Goddamn dog collar and leash around my neck. This son of a bitch is taking pictures of me. I remember he took a lot of fucking pictures of me. Shit, man.
What?
He beat the shit out of me. He put shit in my eyes. He shocked the hell out of me. He injected Drano into my voice box. He screwed me all the fucking time.
He raped you?
While I was drugged and tied up and shocked, yeah, he raped me.
And when did you meet this guy?
Monday night, sometime after midnight.
Monday night?
Yeah, but what day is it today?
Saturday.
Bryson got free by burning his bonds with matches and making a lucky leap from the second-floor window, trailing a leash from the dog collar. Had Bryson not escaped, his fate could have been in the bathroom above the torture chamber.
whenever he got tired of his, quote, project, which in this case was dismembering this young man, he'd just leave it, secure the door, go down and take care of normal activities, and actually come back to it like it was a job.
Police found 2 skulls, but no other body parts. Sometimes the job took Berdella to the basement.
I had met Bob before. I knew Al Reeder, who was the prosecuting attorney. I contacted Bob and Al Reeder and said, Al, can I be of help? You know, this is something that I'm concerned about. I was particularly concerned with the attitude the city took. A lot of laughing, a lot of Berdella jokes, making fun of what he had done, which was one of the worst crimes I'd ever seen in this city or that anybody could possibly do. And I felt that something had to be done to call attention to the seriousness of the crime and to deal with it, to respond to it. And so my role initially was to approach Al, said, if I can be of help, let me know. He said, okay, Bob is sort of suicidal. We want to keep him alive. We want to understand what happened. We'll have you visit him once or twice a week, but you have to keep it quiet. We'll put you in the back door of the jail. We won't tell anybody you're visiting because you'll probably have some death threats if anybody knows you're coming in.
It was pretty odd. I mean, number one, it was Easter weekend. It was on the Saturday before Easter, so not something you were particularly looking for to happen. It was in the middle of the NCAA Final Four, which was in Kansas City that year, and it was in the middle of my re-election. It played into my re-election because the person who ran against me that year kept bringing up the case and using it in the campaign against me. I think it kind of backfired on her, but it became part of the campaign nevertheless. So the timing of it was truly unusual. I would love to see him executed. I think what he did is abominable. There is no way to minimize the atrocity of what he did, regardless of what his demeanor is in the interview. You cannot minimize the inhumanity that this guy committed on other people.
My initial thought was that it was a couple of homosexuals that had probably had a lover's quarrel, and that it would play itself out like many other cases do that start out in a similar nature.
I was in charge of the fugitive apprehension that handled missing persons. And at the time, there were 2 missing persons reports filed. In both those missing persons reports, the common denominator at that time was Bob Berdella.
I was the courts reporter, Jackson County Courts, for the Kansas City Times. And so heard the announcement. I knew it was going to be coming up on my beat. Tom Jackman was cops, I was courts. It was pretty much our ball game.
Bob's base of operations during the day and where he came when he had guys tied to his bed in his house was right there at the Westport Flea Market Bar and Grill.
Sexual psychopaths, serial killers, often torture their victims first, revel in the power they have over them. Quite often they ejaculate spontaneously without ever achieving penetration. They are that hopped up by their own evil. They are that hopped up by hands-on evil, just touching their victims. Sex is sex. Everybody wants sex. The old joke from the 1950s was, I want to find the guy who invented sex and ask him what he's working on now. It's the big deal in life. It is the cause of divorce, the cause of murder. It is the cause of serial murder. Homosexual men kill homosexual men. Heterosexual men kill women. It goes like that. That's it. You kill within your racial profile. You kill within your sexual orientation profile.
Hey, pick him up. Let's give him some shit. Let's fuck with this dude. Yo, hey. Come on, man. Make a run. Make a run. Make a run. Get up here. No, go. What's up, dog? Man, why are you taking away? Why are you? Hey, we're rolling back with my picture.
Where are you heading, man?
Why are you taking my picture? Whoa! Throw out the anger. Hey, by the way, you need to put your foot out. Hold it still. Yeah, drag your feet.
Hey, are you guys cool? You guys aren't cops, are you?
Yeah, we're cops. Look at us.
No, we're the demon dogs, man.
You never know. Demon dogs?
Yeah, the demon dogs. Yeah.
What are you doing? Where are you guys heading? No, we're going to shoot this fucking video for this movie. This independent companies, which means no money. Yeah, right. Basically. Well, look, guys, get out of here. Sorry, man.
Sorry,
Smile for the camera. We're going the wrong way. It's the camera, man.
Chris. Okay, Chris, you have fun, man.
Good luck. Good luck, bro. Good luck. Keep your pants on.
Boy, that was weird. My little documentary.
Serial killers are sexual psychopaths who kill for sexual gratification and power over their victims. They are cowardly, they are weak, they are quite often heedless and tremendously arrogant to think that they have the right to take another human life. Serial killers are sacks of shit who deserve the very sternest measures that our American punitive system of justice has to offer. Hi, Hep Gats. I'm James Elroy. I'm a novelist, I'm a journalist, I'm a short story writer, I'm a screenwriter, and I'm here to introduce Ben Mead's Bonnaroo film about sex psychopath and serial killer Bob Berdella, who terrorized Kansas City, Missouri in the late 1980s.